that every time anybody in the world has questions, those questions will have answers in that week's Torah portion. The Torah commands us to write the Talmud. If not, why do we follow God's commandments yet do things the Torah didn't command us to? Okay, so there is actually in this week's Parasha, as usual, the answer to everything is always in this week's Parasha. Every week, I say the same thing. It's always in this week's Parasha. And whether it's you ask a question next week, it's going to be in that week's Parasha. This week, it's also in this Parasha. So let's see where it is. Hold on. We'll find it. This week's Parasha talks about how Hashem has Torot. What is Torot? Torot is the plural for Torah. And why does it say multiple Torahs? Because the Torah has a written Torah and an oral Torah. Here we go. In chapter 26, verse number 46. Ele achukim v'amishpatim v'atorot asher natan Adonai beno uben bnei Yisrael be'ar Sinai b'yad Moshe. These are the decrees and ordinances and teachings, Torot, teachings, it's plural, that Hashem gave between himself and the children of Israel at Mount Sinai through Moshe. So the Torah has both a written Torah and an oral Torah. What does that mean? The written Torah is what we got at Mount Sinai, and the oral Torah is what we got at Mount Sinai. But at Mount Sinai, things were a little bit different than they are right now. At Mount Sinai, first we got the 10 Commandments, and we got the written Torah up to Parashat Yitro. Parashat Yitro is the parasha in the written Torah that's about Mount Sinai. And over the next 40 years, Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu to write other parts of the Torah that are what's happening or what happened throughout that time. But the oral Torah is the rules of the Torah itself, the entire Torah, the written Torah. Now, why do we have to have both a written Torah and an oral Torah? It's because the written Torah was written in such a fashion that you cannot understand what it means and what it's saying without rules, without specific rules of how to understand it. For example, one of the 10 Commandments is that we're not allowed to violate Shabbat. We have to observe Shabbat. But what does it mean to observe Shabbat? What does it mean to observe Shabbat? Does that mean to look at something and just write a word named Shabbat and just look at it? Does it mean putting something that's writing something Shabbat, put it in a cage, and now it's keeping Shabbat? What does observing Shabbat mean? So the oral Torah told us that this is referring to the 39 melachot, 39 different types of activities that we are forbidden from doing on Shabbat. The same thing with tefillin, for example, the phylacteries. These are things that every Jewish male has to do every single day except Shabbat and holidays. He has to put them on, one on the arm and one on the head. Now, the laws of the tefillin, which the Torah tells us we have to put them on. This is something that's in the Torah. This is something that we repeat every single day in our Shema Yisrael prayer, that Hashem gave us the commandment to put on the tefillin. This is a Torah commandment. But what is the tefillin? What is the tefillin? How does it look like? What's the shape? What's in it? So the laws of the tefillin and which prayers are inside it and how to actually design it, what shape it should be, what color it is, what's the size, and so on. All of those laws are not specified in the written Torah. That is in the oral Torah. Another example would be Brit Milah. Avraham Avinu was told to remove the orla from his body. What is orla? What is the definition of the word orla? Now, if I was Avraham and Hashem would have told me to remove the orla, I would say, you know what? I'll remove a nail. I'll call the nail orla. It's much easier and painless to remove a nail. Or better yet, if it has to inflict some pain, then I'll move maybe a hair. I'll pluck a hair out. I'll call that the orla. Or maybe I'll take the ear off. I'll take a little ear off. Some people get an earring. It hurts a little bit, but it goes away. The last thing I would think is to remove a piece of my reproductive member. That's the last thing in the world I would ever remove. But that's the definition. That's where the orla is. The orla is on the male member. Now, of course, there's also an orla on our heart, but that's a spiritual orla. And that's obviously clarified in the Torah. Point being is that the written Torah was written in such a fashion that it is not understandable, and you cannot implement any of the laws, any of the mitzvot, without the clarification of these laws. So you have the laws in the Torah, and you have the definition of the laws in the Oral Torah. And therefore, both had to be given. Now, the human mind was at an exponentially higher level during the time of Moses than it is today. Everyone was a prophet at the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, meaning all of the Jewish people were all prophets. They literally heard and saw the words of God, something that we cannot even comprehend. What is the voice of God, or what does it look like? These are things that we cannot comprehend. This is what's written in the book of Shmot, in Parashat Yitro, that we saw the words of God. In the book of Deuteronomy, it's written, in Parashat Vayetchanan, we saw the words of God. What does it mean to see the words of God? Do you see anything? You hear anything? No. So point is that everyone was a prophet. Everyone was an exponentially higher intellectual level than we can comprehend. And therefore, they did not need the Oral Torah written for them. They were able to look at a verse in the Torah, in the written Torah, and understand all parts of its meaning. The plain meaning, the midrash meaning, and the secret meaning. The pardes, pshat, remez, drash, and sod. The plain meaning, the hinted, meaning the lesson beyond the lesson, the story behind the story, and the secret meaning, the Kabbalistic meaning, mystical meanings of certain verses, all the verses, because every verse in the Torah is prophetic. Point being is, in that generation, and for many years thereafter, they were able to look at the written Torah and understand all of it. But as the generations went down further and further from Hashem, meaning they started making more and more sins, the level of human intellect started deteriorating further and further, to the point where at the time of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, he already understood that if we do not take the Oral Torah and put the Oral Torah, or at least part of it, into a written form, we will ultimately forget the Torah, chas v'shalom, and will not know how to observe Shabbat. We will not know how to observe any of the mitzvot. In fact, one of the punishments that Yeshua ben Nun got, because he did not ask Moshe Rabbeinu a question during his last days, when Moshe Rabbeinu asked him, do you have any more questions to ask me? And Yeshua ben Nun, since he was always next to Moshe Rabbeinu, he said, no, you already taught me everything. Hashem punished Yeshua ben Nun for that. He said, what do you mean? How do you not have more questions for Moshe Rabbeinu? And because of that, Yeshua ben Nun forgot 300 halachot, to the point where Am Yisrael nearly stoned him because he forgot to actually how to fulfill these 300 laws, until one of the Chachamim discovered them through a certain way, in a certain way, and they brought back that part of the Torah to life. In so many words, the Oral Torah was being forgotten, until Rabbi Yehuda Nasi knew that if we do not write down the Oral Torah, we're going to end up forgetting the entire Torah, and there's going to come a time where we will not know how to observe Shabbat, and what the laws of Shabbat are, what the laws of kosher are. We see today how clueless people are. If you ask people certain laws of the Torah, they do not know them. In fact, even if they read a book, sometimes they don't understand what they're reading. So it's the Oral Torah, which in essence is the Talmud, is what our Torah is. So when the Torah says in this week's Parasha that you have to observe my decrees, my ordinances, my teachings, all of those are plural. And the most particular one to your question is when it says Torahs, Torot, which is plural. Torah, when usually you say the word Torah, you're saying it as singular. But here it's saying Torot, meaning there's more than one Torah. What's more than one Torah? There's the written Torah, and then there's the oral Torah. And this you'll find across the Torah in many places, where many times Hashem is referring to the Torah. He's referring to it at times as singular, at times as plural. when it's singular, it's usually because the Oral Torah is specified through a different word. When it's plural, that's because it's referring to both the written and the Oral Torah in that one word. Either way, the Oral Torah is how we know what the Torah says, and without it, we would not know. This is the reason why the Christians in the church created a religion that's so far removed from Judaism, because they interpret the Torah in their own, according to their own understanding, and that's the reason why they have no laws. They have no laws. They don't have any laws that they comply with. It's according to the Torah. They don't comply with the Ten Commandments. They don't comply with any part of the Torah. So, and they're saying, the reason why we don't comply with the Torah is because Yoshke nullified the Torah. But Yoshke himself said he didn't come to nullify the Torah. So even their own book says that they're contradicting themselves. So how could they arrive at such a conclusion? Simple. When you interpret the Torah according to your own human understanding, you will not be able to succeed in understanding any part of the Torah, not even a single verse. Not even the verse, Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim v'et haaretz, which is, in the beginning Hashem created the heaven and the earth. Even that verse, it is impossible for any human being to understand what that verse means without the Oral Torah. Because there are so many different teachings, just in the first word, Bereshit, that you can literally have thousands of shiurei Torah, thousands of Torah lessons of hours long, just off of the first word. And you can do that with any word in the Torah. There's no word that's more or less than any other word in the Torah. But again, without the Oral Torah, a person cannot understand any part of the Torah. And that's one of the things that people that haven't learned Torah don't know. So, as you can see, your question is in this week's parasha. Next week you're going to ask a question, it's also going to be in this week's parasha. How is that so? Very simple. HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes it so that His divine providence is shown in such a fashion that every time anybody in the world has questions, those questions will have answers in that week's Torah portion. And that's divine providence that we've seen week after week, year after year, all these years we've been learning and teaching Baruch Hashem. Thank you very much for learning with me, everyone. May Hashem bless each and every single one of you that's watching, that's learning, that's sharing this lecture with their friends, family, and even their enemies. And Be'ezrat Hashem, we continue spreading the Torah around the world. Please, if you are able to help us continue doing everything that we're doing, donate at bhtorah.org, or you can become a paid subscriber on YouTube, or you could donate by sending a check, and many other ways that you could support what we're doing. Baruch Hashem for learning, and Be'ezrat Hashem we'll continue learning again next week. Call to everyone.
בחוקותיי תלכו, ואת מצוותיי תשמעו, ועשיתם אותם,